Hello, the breaking news at this hour, you watching the Indian Eyes live. Former Prime Minister of India, Dr. Manmohan Singh is no more. Dr. Manmohan Singh passed away at the age of 92. He passed away, he took his last breath at the All India Institute of Medical Sciences in New Delhi on Thursday evening. 92-year-old Dr. Manmohan Singh was unwell for a long time. A distinguished economist and a statesman, Dr. Manmohan Singh served 2 consecutive terms as the Prime Minister of India, leading a very difficult coalition under the Congress-led United Progressive Alliance from 2004 to 2014. He was the Prime Minister of India for 10 long years, tumultuous years. He was the architect of India's economic liberalization in 1991 as the Finance Minister in the P.V. Narasimha Rao government. Dr. Manmohan Singh was born on the 26th of September in 1932 in the Punjab province of undivided India. Dr. Singh earned a first-class honours degree in economics in 1957 from the University of Cambridge in the United Kingdom. He completed his DPhil in economics from the Nuffield College at the Oxford University in 1962. In 1971, Dr. Singh joined the Government of India as the economic advisor in the Commerce Ministry. This was soon followed by his appointment as the chief economic advisor in the Ministry of Finance in 1972. Among the many governmental positions that Dr. Singh has occupied are Secretary in the Ministry of Finance. He was a Finance Secretary. He was a Deputy Chairman of the Planning Commission, the then Planning Commission, which is now transformed into Niti Aayog. He was the Governor of the Reserve Bank of India. He was the advisor to the Prime Minister and the Chairman of the University Grants Commission. Dr. Singh spent 5 years between 1991 and 1996 as India's Finance Minister. His role in ushering in a comprehensive policy of economic reforms is now recognized worldwide. He was the architect of India's liberalization program. Many awards and honors were conferred upon Dr. Singh in his public career. Dr. Singh was conferred with India's second highest civilian honor, the Padma Vibhushan, in 1987. Along with this, he was conferred with the Jawaharlal Nehru Birth Centenary Award of the Indian Science Congress at the Asia Money Award for Finance, a Minister of the Year from 1993 to 1994. The Euro Money Award for Finance Minister of the Year 1993. The Adam Smith Prize of the University of Cambridge in 1956. And the Wrights Prize for Distinguished Performance at St. John's College in Cambridge in 1955. Dr. Singh had represented India at many international conferences and in several international organizations. He also led the Indian delegations to the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Cyprus and to the World Conference on Human Rights in Vienna in 1993. And Prime Minister Modi has expressed grief at the demise of passing away of the former Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh. He shared his condolences on social media platform X as, and I quote, "India mourns the loss of one of its most distinguished leaders, Dr. Manmohan Singh ji. Rising from humble origins, he became a respected economist, held various important government positions, including that of Finance Minister, where he left a lasting impact on our economic policy. His interventions in Parliament were insightful and valuable. As Prime Minister, he made extensive efforts to improve the lives of the people." Taking to X, Prime Minister Modi further wrote that Dr. Manmohan Singh ji and I interacted regularly when he was the Prime Minister and I was the Chief Minister of Gujarat. We would have extensive deliberations on various subjects relating to governance. His wisdom and humility were always visible In this hour of grief, my thoughts are with the family of Dr. Manmohan Singh ji and his friends and countless admirers. Om Shanti. And my colleague Jessica Taneja joins me. Jessica, give us the latest. We know that Dr. Manmohan Singh passed away, former Prime Minister, at about 9:51 p.m. He breathed his last. Give us what is happening at the All India Medical Institute. Are there leaders pouring in right now? And when are you hearing anything about his last rites?
Vadra, of course, being one of them, and as the news now gets out, of course, there will be more leaders.
Jessica, we missed out on the beginning of your audio. Could you answer my question? Could you answer again, please?
Are you able to hear me now?
I can hear you now.
That's correct. So, as I was pointing out earlier, yes, he is, seeing all tributes poured in, and also leaders, of course, now come in to All India Institute of Medical Sciences, where he breathed his last. As you pointed out, we don't know exactly which leaders are in the fray at this point to be there at the hospital premises, but what we are hearing is Priyanka Gandhi Vadra is there, and along with Congress leaders. Nothing has been heard of from the Congress President Mallikarjun Kharge being there, but he has put out a tribute to Manmohan Singh, the former Prime Minister who breathed his last just a short while ago. And of course, we are expecting more leaders to be there, and his last rites, of course, being announced as is accorded to Prime Minister, and a Prime Minister we're talking about here who served 2 terms, and not just in the capacity as Prime Minister, but also as the country's finance minister in 91, and bringing in and ushering in an economic reform. So as tributes pour in, Amrit, we await for more details on how his last rites will be planned. But those details, I think, will be put out in a short while from now. But yes, we're expecting more leaders to be joining in to pay their tributes to the late former Prime Minister.
All right, Jessica, we'll wait for those details to come in. Jessica, what would you say, how would history remember Dr. Manmohan Singh? Because I remember he once said in Parliament that history will judge me. How do you think history will judge him?
I think history should judge him quite kindly, in a sense where he has been a reformer of sorts, a prime minister who did things in his own subtle, quiet way, an academic, educated from overseas in the United Kingdom, an Oxford, graduate. And of course, his background in a sense where he even held India's foreign policy forward, talking about the 2008 iconic US-India civil nuclear agreement. Despite facing so much opposition for it, it still did go ahead. And from that time to now, we've seen an upward progression of the US-India ties as well, on how it picked up from that particular moment. Because of course, he's had quite a lot of significant moments when it has shown that it has put India on the map, and he certainly, as a prime minister for 2 terms, did make a significant contribution. In a sense, of course, every leader face their own challenges, and so was the case with the prime minister who served for nearly a decade. But I think history should remember him as the prime minister who did steer the course forward and did put India on the map. While even the world, faced quite a lot of economic distress towards 2008, but still, it was India that perhaps was not reeling under the kind of pressure as we saw everywhere else in the world. So I think this is the way his tenure would look like to many.
Absolutely. Manmohan Singh would be remembered as a reformer, backed by P.V. Narasimha Rao at that time in 1991 when he was the finance minister, brought in the bold economic reforms, liberalization, when the country's foreign reserves were at its lowest. The gold was running out. Almost all gold of the country was pawned. Dr. Manmohan Singh, backed of course by Prime Minister Narasimha Rao, his Prime Minister took the bold step of liberalizing what was then a socialist economy. That was a very, very strong move, given that the Congress had opted for a socialist economy. Then he would be remembered as the Prime Minister who served for 10 years. Not an easy time in office. UPA was a coalition of various forces, often at cross purposes. The man who stood firm on the US nuclear deal, but also the man who never ever won a Lok Sabha election. He contested one election, lost it from South Delhi. The man who was not a ground root politician. He was not a politician in the typical sense. He did not have a mass following, but a man who did not have following enough on the ground, but a man who was a technocrat in that sense, a man who took his own decisions when it came to standing on the nuclear deal, even if his UPA 1 government had to go when the left pulled out, but a man who gave in to coalition pressure, politics pressures. So he had a mixed record, and I think that's how history would judge him. I go back to my colleague Jessica Taneja. Jessica, this is what came to my mind right away. How would you think you would you read that?
Well, I do agree with your analysis there. He's had his moments in history. All of us have seen, those iconic moments on television where there have been much disagreement with what the Prime Minister was looking forward to in terms of the India idea for the world and what collectively the country thought of. Of course, there have, as I said earlier, been challenges for many leaders in their tenures everywhere in the world, as has been the case with Manmohan Singh back then as well. We had scams that pretty much toppled his government and threatened the entire existence of the UPA. And eventually then, the current times we're living in. But with the way former Prime Minister Manmohan Singh back then held firm on some of his own convictions and some of his own ideas about how policy decisions need to be taken and conducted and formulated, were of course things that will set him apart. And one example, as I was pointing out earlier, which everybody would remember today, is about the civil nuclear deal, something which was an impossible task back then. Relationships were strained, and as I have observed India-US relationship, pretty much there is an agreement that was a pivotal moment in establishing that relationship to the effect that we see today as how it has moved forward, despite, again, its challenges in the current times. So with not just that as an example, even in 91, when he was the finance minister, Amrit, I was too young to remember much greater detail to that effect, but from what my father and my grandfather, often would tell me about, is that there is a prime minister there is a finance minister in Manmohan Singh who would certainly be remembered for the kind of economic reforms he ushered in, be it 91 or be it allowing
Jessica, you perhaps
investment.
were way too young then. I was in school then. I was in middle school at that time. I remember India's foreign exchange reserves were perilously low. The balance of payment crisis was there. The gold was pawned. There was just no way, but it was a political decision that had to be taken, which P.V. Narasimha Rao took. Dr. Manmohan Singh followed suit as his finance minister and effected those reforms. Jessica, please carry on.
Right. And, as you point out, I mean, the details for you, of course, would bring out the fact that, again, the kind of legacy that he now leaves would certainly be looked at in a light where, yes, he was a man who believed in his own political calculations and in his own policy ideas, despite whatever opposition, because he was a man for many who thought of India first as well. So, of course, a prime minister who was patriotic and nationalistic in his own way, just that identifying him would, of course, in that light, would lead to a difference in perspective for many. But well, that is democracy, and that's the choice people are left with. But I think there will be a collective sentiment of remembering a prime minister who did fairly well for the country.
All right. Many thanks for joining us. We'll perhaps come back to you later and condoling the demise of former Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, India's former Prime Minister. The Home Minister Amit Shah has written on X, and I quote, "The news of demise of former Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh is extremely sad. From being the Governor of the Reserve Bank of India to the Finance Minister of the country, and as the Prime Minister, Dr. Manmohan Singh played an important role in the governance of the nation. I express my condolences to his family and supporters in this hour of grief. May Vaheguru grant peace to his soul and give strength to his family to bear this loss." Unquote. So this is what Amit Shah, Home Minister, has said, that the news of the demise of former Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh is extremely sad. From being the Governor of the RBI to the Finance Minister of the country, and as the Prime Minister of the country, Dr. Manmohan Singh's contribution was immense. So the Prime Minister has condoled the death, the Home Minister has condoled the death, and also India's President Draupadi Murmu has condoled the demise of former Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh. She expressed her grief on X, writing, and I quote, "Former Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh ji was one of those rare politicians who seamlessly bridged the worlds of academia and administration. In his various roles in public office, he made critical contributions to reforming India's economy. He will always be remembered for his service to the nation, his unblemished political life, and his utmost humility. His passing is a great loss to all of us. I pay my respectful homage to one of the greatest sons of Bharat and convey my heartfelt condolences to his family, friends and admirers." And Aditi Tandon, Associate Editor of the Tribune, joins us for more. Aditi, how would history remember Dr. Manmohan Singh?
Dr. Manmohan Singh's most abiding legacy will, of course, be, his role in unleashing the financial liberalization in 1991 and putting India firmly on the path to progress. And we should also remember that he led the country through a very tumultuous period of coalition politics throughout his decade-long rule, from 2004 to 2014. He did provide a stable government, although there were allegations of corruption, which continue to be contested in courts of law even today. But throughout his period, he will be remembered for the fact that he presided over an average GDP growth of 8.5% through the decade of UPA. There can be, various claims and counterclaims with respect to the legacy of Dr. Manmohan Singh, but nobody can deny the fact that he was a staunch nationalist, the fact that he was ready to risk his own government in 2008 just because he did not want to, pull back on the international commitment that India had made to the US on the Indo-US nuclear deal. He risked his government. He faced a vote of no confidence after the left partners withdrew support from the UPA, and he survived that vote. So, there were high points in his career as there were low points. But largely, I think even his most staunch adversaries will always remember him for being a soft-spoken, a very modest politician, who always whose silence always spoke louder than words, although he was criticized for being too silent on a range of controversial issues. But the fact of the matter is, he did put India on the path, and it is the fruit of his reform that the country is reaping today.
Given the kind of mandate that the UPA had in 2004, he did not have it going easy because the left gave him a very, very tough time, especially on the nuclear deal. But Dr. Manmohan Singh stood his ground. What does it say? What does that say about the man? What does that say about him? A man who wasn't a grassroots politician, who hadn't cut his teeth in the rough and tumble of the electoral politics of the country, but was in a way, appointed by the then Congress presidentship.
It's very interesting that Pranab Mukherjee, who was his strongest rival within the Congress and, a clear front runner for prime ministership in 2004, also in his, book, The Coalition Era, if you read that book, even in that book, Pranab Mukherjee goes on to say that Dr. Manmohan Singh was a very strong nationalist, that he was a man of courage and conviction, and he was certainly not an accidental prime minister, although we've had books written along that title.
Yeah, Sanjay Baru's book, yeah.
Yeah, so you see, Dr. Pranab Mukherjee, the late president of India, who was a senior colleague in the Manmohan Singh cabinet, has written in his book that I am convinced that the future will judge Manmohan Singh in a different light, just as the future has judged P.V. Narasimha Rao. So, it is now really for the future to judge former Prime Minister Manmohan Singh's legacy, because he has many high points, although he does have his low points. And, there were allegations that he allowed a super cabinet to run in the Sonia Gandhi-led National Advisory Council, that he allowed them to steer government policy, which was not really constitutional. His rivals always used that against him. But the fact of the matter is, India, at the right time, when India was in the throes of a crisis, we were on the verge of a default, a major global default. That was the time when then Union Finance Minister Manmohan Singh in the P.V. Narasimha Rao government gave us the gift of economic liberalization.
Aditi, one of the critiques, you and I used to cover Parliament both at that time, one of the critiques of his was that while he did well in UPA 1, he perhaps shouldn't have taken up the role of the Prime Minister in UPA 2. In hindsight, how would you look at that?
Yeah, now that is also a debatable issue, because the Congress party of the time was itself confused about whether to launch Rahul Gandhi or not launch Rahul Gandhi. And it was really the confusion within the Congress ranks that had Manmohan Singh continue as the prime ministerial face of the Congress party in 2009 elections. In fact, I can never forget, I was there when the manifesto was launched ahead of that election. And Sonia Gandhi was asked, by journalists, who is going to be the PM face? She pulled up the manifesto like this, and there were two faces on the manifesto, her own face and that of Prime Minister Manmohan Singh. She hid her face with a hand and indicated that it will be Prime Minister Manmohan Singh who will be the face of the government again. See, Prime Minister Manmohan Singh in his own time in the PMO always deferred to Sonia Gandhi. Let's not forget the fact that he continued as Prime Minister despite the fact that Rahul Gandhi tore up the ordinance of his own cabinet publicly. So he was ready to swallow his pride only because he deferred too much to Sonia Gandhi, to whom he owed his entire political career. So if Sonia Gandhi had told him to vacate the seat for Rahul Gandhi, do you think it was plausible or even, thinkable or even imaginable that Manmohan Singh ji would have said no? That's not the case. It is now easier for a lot of Congress people and
Aditi, then would you as his critics argue, was he a weak prime minister who did not have his own say?
See, was he a weak prime minister is really for history to judge. But let's also remember, you just said earlier on in your own reference that he was leading a very shaky coalition. The left partners had already withdrawn support. He could not go beyond a point in the cabinet. He kept saying throughout his tenure that I have coalition compulsions. Every time allegations of corruption were raised against him, that used to be standard reply. Yeah. Now, what could he have done? He could either have allowed the government to fall, which would have perhaps brought greater ignominy to not just the Congress party, but perhaps have pushed India into a phase.
No, but many argue, Aditi, that he could have stepped away personally from the Prime Minister's post.
Yeah, so that's the point I just made, that he deferred and honored Sonia Gandhi too much to publicly embarrass her with his resignation.
Okay, let's come to the man, Dr. Manmohan Singh. He was a thorough gentleman, a man of personal integrity, which even his most ardent critics in the opposition who are now in the government, Advani and other leaders are on record, Lal Krishna Advani and other leaders are on record on the floor of the House saying that his personal integrity is not in question, yet the UPA-2 government faced huge charges of corruption, of indecisiveness. How would you think history would judge Manmohan Singh, the individual?
I think Manmohan Singh, the individual, will be generously judged because he has a fairly vast legacy of highs. Of course, a moderate legacy of lows also. But in the overall life and times of Manmohan Singh, he will be judged kindly by history simply because he did set high standards of political morality in his own PMO. It was a given that his family, or he would never, condescend any kind of links of his family in politics. He would always live very modestly. In fact, for a very long time in his life, he was known to drive Maruti 800, and so he had those things, every time he used to fall ill, he would always go to AIIMS, New Delhi. You see, he would never rush to a private establishment. He would never go abroad. So that was also his way of showing trust in India's institutions. So that also is a very big part of his personal, character, that he trusted Indian institutions. He trusted his life with the doctors of All India Institute of Medical Sciences. He's had several episodes of hospitalization before today's. And every time if you look up, and research, you will find that he always admitted himself to AIIMS.
Absolutely. He was a man of the institutions, in that sense. I mean, RBI governor, he was the vice chairman of the then Planning Commission of India. He was really a technocrat turned into a politician. But he never won a single Lok Sabha election, Aditi.
In fact, there's a book by his daughter, Daman Singh, called Strictly Personal. That book has a small reference to this episode that you allude to, the 1998 loss of Manmohan Singh from South Delhi constituency.
Yeah.
That was the only time he contested
and lost.
In fact, his daughter writes in the book that my mother, Gursharan Kaur, had advised my father against contesting this election. So perhaps that was also the only time Manmohan Singh did not listen to his wife.
Okay. And he listened to the Congress, to his party.
Yeah, party, of course, everybody listens to.
All right. Okay. Let's talk about UPA-2. Aditi, one last question. Aditi, UPA-2, how would history judge his role in UPA-2?
You see, in hindsight, I do think that Manmohan Singh could have asserted himself much more than he ended up asserting himself. What were the reasons? What were these high compulsions? Nobody will know unless some of his own cabinet colleagues come out with a memoir describing those years, because these were very difficult years for him. Of course, like you also earlier said, he could have resigned. That was an option. But was moving away the option? Maybe Manmohan Singh chose national interest above personal interest at the time. He was happy to take up all the allegations than to, relinquish his post and force the country into another crisis at the time.
Absolutely.
But within the cabinet, I do believe that he could have shown more firmness, like he showed in the Indo-US nuclear deal matter. It was not as though he did not have firmness in his character. He did have, but obviously there were overriding compulsions that kept him from doing that.
True.
We do not know what those were.
But nobody, even the vilified of his critics, can argue that he was a man of great integrity, a gentleman, a soft-spoken man, and a man who had the interests of the country at his heart. It's a life well lived. When he's gone at 92, he's lived a good life. He's lived, it's a life well lived, and I think everybody would agree on that. Aditi, I'll request you to stay on. There is more news coming in. India's Vice President Jagdeep Dhankar has condoled the death of former Prime Minister. He said that and I quote, deeply pained to learn about the passing of Dr. Manmohan Singh ji, former Prime Minister and a distinguished economist who transformed India's economic landscape. His profound understanding of economy, gentle demeanor, and unwavering commitment to India's progress will forever be etched in my memory. Dr. Singh's passing, India has lost a leader of towering intellect and statesman par excellence. And that's it in this newscast. Thanks for watching. We'll be back in a moment.